The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar. I'm so excited to share with you this webinar, The Missing Link in Leadership. And we are really fortunate to have our guest, Dan Lyons. Before I bring him on, let me tell you a little bit about Dan. Dan Lyons is the founder and president of Team Concepts, Inc. As an oarsman, Dan rowed on 7 U.S. national teams, during which he competed in the World Championships in England in the Straight Four and the Seoul Olympics in the Quox pair. He has won 11 national championships in various events. His coaching career includes coaching at the U.S. Naval Academy, Oxford University, Stanford University, Drexel University, Georgetown University, and is now the elite coach at Penn Athletic Club in Philadelphia. He has a remarkable career, and in 1997 was recognized into the induction into the U.S. Rowing Hall of Fame. What I love about Dan is he really knows how to get people moving with leadership, and he knows how to talk and teach it and break it down into sections that you can digest and take the material immediately and start using it today. And that's the genesis of Team Concepts leadership model, the 8 secrets of the inspirational leadership. And it's based on Dan's 20 years of experience, and we are so fortunate to have him on this webinar. Dan, thank you, and say hello to everybody.
Hi everyone, glad to be here as usual and sharing this hosting duty with my wonderful friend Omar, and we are ready to go.
Great. So we were talking earlier about asking the right questions of your people, so I'm just going to let you take it from there, Dan.
Thanks, Omar. Yeah, what we're going to talk about today is what I term the missing link in leadership, and obviously all of us out there know that leadership is an ongoing journey, an organic experience for all of us. There's a lot of links to be chained together in order to create the outcome that we all seek, no matter what that is or who we're working with, as we're trying to move people and move events from one point to the next. So a lot of things have to go right. A lot of things have to be done well. So we'll term those things links. So there's a lot of things that we teach and that we understand to be practical, tactical necessities of creating and leading a high-performance team that can be taught in the classroom. There are processes that we can follow. We all know that. We either have learned that in a formal sense or in an informal sense as we've gone through our lives. How do we lead people? How do we get what we want, basically? So what we're going to be talking about is a link that we don't really think about in a formal sense that much, which I'm going to basically term just community. That the missing link of leadership is the development of a communal outlook and a communal sense of the importance of bringing together a sense of being part of something bigger than oneself, and how important that is in our focus. And I think ultimately what we want to start off with here as a beginning point in our examination of leadership and the links that we have to forge in order to create a high-performance team is the attitude of what it is we're looking for. So that's why what we have in front of us is the questions that we ask of ourselves and our people. So I think that when we approach any leadership situation, whether we are in a work environment or a personal environment or a sports environment or a political environment, basically, and by the way, all environments involving people by definition are political environments. So we can't get caught up when people say, well, that's politics and work, or that's politics and sports, or whatever. Politics is everywhere. It's just, it is what it is. When we are dealing with each other, we're dealing with politics. We're dealing with how we feel about each other and how we react with each other and so forth and so on. So all leadership is politics, and all politics is leadership. It's all about that. So whatever we're dealing with in terms of people, we are, and wherever we want to go, we have to go at that situation with a very well-defined attitude and a very well-defined approach. And so what I'd like us to think about today is asking some perhaps different questions than we're used to, and to try to get at the core of this missing link in leadership. And I think the first question that we have to ask, and sometimes I think we're afraid to ask this question of each other, which is, why are we here? Why are we in this place at this time? And this is a question which we're afraid to ask sometimes because maybe we don't want to know the answer, and sometimes we don't ask it because we assume that we know the answer. So, for instance, if I have a group of people who are involved in a business project and they've been hired by the company to come in and do this project and so forth, we're going to assume the answer to that question is, well, I've been hired to do this project. This is my skill set. This is why I'm here, to create an outcome that is conducive with the goals of the organization. So that's why I'm here. We're like, okay, well, that is legitimate. Absolutely. We don't need to go any further than that most of the time. But in order to lead and not just manage, I believe we need to go further than that. I believe we need to get a little bit deeper into the why are we here. I remember when I was rowing a long time ago now, unfortunately, back in the mid-'80s, and we had a wonderful coach who I've talked about a lot in these past webinars, Ted Nash, who was an Olympic gold medalist in 1960 and a bronze medalist in '64, and he's been on 12 Olympic teams in his very long and storied career. And Ted's coaching philosophy was really at base all about the exploration of that question. Why are we here? And the challenge to each one of us to answer that question at a very deep level, not at a superficial level. And I remember in 1986 when I came to Penn Athletic Club, where Ted was the coach, we had actually left the national camp to come to this club system, and sitting down with Ted and 13 other men in a room that was surrounded by trophies and plaques and pictures of all of the great things that all of these heroes of rowing had done for the past century and a half. And we were seated on a hardwood floor, and Ted stood in front of that trophy case, and he looked around and he said, why are you here, gentlemen? What do you want out of this summer? And believe it or not, no one had asked me that question before. And you would think, of course, people are asking that question all the time, but think about it. Have you? And how many people in your life have you asked that question of why are you here? It's so fundamental and yet filled with so much assumption. And I thought about it as he turned his gaze on me, and I kind of looked back at him a little startled, and then I said, well, I want to be on the best crew that's ever come out of this country. And he said, okay, and he moved on to the next guy who said something like, well, geez, I just want to get in shape. And then he moved on to the next guy who said something, well, I just want to get technically better, and so forth and so on. He went down the line. And then he came back and he just sort of smiled. And he said, okay, now we're going to find out over the next 8 weeks why you are really here. And we didn't know what he meant by that. But we found out gradually as every workout that was challenging and awe-inspiring in a way for the depth of its difficulty came to be associated not with pain or not with work or not with effort, but it came to be associated with each other, with the the sense of community, the sense of being part of something special that we were forging in the moment. And when it came down to it, the answer to that question, none of which, by the way, of us had answered in the way certainly that Ted felt about it, came down to the accumulation of experiences together, that accumulation of bonding moments where it was all about us. It was all about the larger sense of us, the communal sense of us. And my argument for creating and leading a high-performance team is that the question, or the answer to the question, why are we here, is always about community. And sometimes we get away from that. And I will be the first to admit that for much of the last 10 years or 15 years, I have, while teaching this, I have gotten away from it. And I've gotten away from it because I've either misidentified the community that I feel most comfortable with, or I have, in the pursuit of other things, gotten away from that which makes those other things possible. And what I mean by that is that in the past, say, 10, 15 years, my commitment has been a commitment to personal security to a certain extent. It's been a commitment to different personal goals. It has gone away from the commitment to each other, the commitment to community. I was at the head of the Charles Regatta a couple of weeks ago, the head of the Charles Regatta in Boston, which is one of the 2 or 3 largest regattas in the world and one of the best well-known. There were 12,000 rowers there, 400,000 people were lining the banks of the river on the 3-day event and just milling about. And I was only there for a couple of hours. I was going from one meeting to another, basically, just flying out to Houston in a couple of hours, and had just come in from Philadelphia and so forth and so on. So I was on my usual busy route. And I drove up, found a parking space, luckily, hopped out of the car, and just was surrounded by the beauty of this lovely autumn Boston afternoon and just the hum and the buzz of thousands of rowers, thousands of coaches and people who were interested in this spectacle. And I wasn't out of the car more than 10 seconds. And I had somebody come up and said, "Oh, hi, Dan." And I'm like, "No, who was it?" "Oh, yeah, I remember him." And 5 seconds, "Oh, hey, how you doing, Dan?" And I just went on. 30 yards from the car, and I'd already been approached by 5 to 10 people. I was only there for 2.5 hours. And in that time, I saw everybody, I thought, that I wanted to see. Every time I said, "Boy, I cannot believe I've just seen him. I haven't seen him in 20 years. Another guy came along and said, "How you doing?" And it became apparent to me as this swell of good feeling continued to grow in intensity and time, that what I had been doing the past 15 years was the pursuit of success and not the pursuit of community. And all of the joy that I felt in that period, that 2.5-hour period of time, was all about what is truly worthwhile in the human pursuit of anything. And I thought about that a lot as I climbed back into my car and headed off to the next event, that the community that meant the most to me, I had been developing my whole life, and yet I had ignored it. And all of the good feeling and the joy that was about success was all about that community. And so the answer to why are we here, for me, has been about community. And I would argue that that is the answer that lies at the base of success for any experiment in leadership. So I just want us to think about that as we're hell-bent for leather here, driving forward, which we all are on this call. Where are we driving? Why are we here? what are we actually moving towards? Is our community our family? Is that what it is? Then if that is the case, how do we approach success vis-a-vis our family? If our community is our work life, then what does it mean to be successful in the community of our work life, the people that we're dealing with? If it's our friends, what does that mean? And how are we expressing that? So in leadership, ultimately, my feeling is what we're trying to develop is that intense expression of our communal self. And in doing that, we create power. And that answers the next question, which is related to that. What is our objective in creating and leading a high-performance team? And that's kind of a long, obviously, diatribe on where I think we should be focusing as we're trying to create this unbroken chain or link of leadership excellence. What should we be focusing on? And what is our true objective? And why are we here? And I think a lot of times we get into the tactical and we forget the strategic. The tactical could be the completion of a project. That's why we're here. The tactical could be we need to get more money to invest in the company we're starting up right now. That is very tactical. But the strategic is, in order to achieve tactical success, we have to create that sense of community which ensures an unbroken flow of positive energy. And I believe that when we go at anything with that type of approach and that type of intent, then we achieve everything else. Whereas if we go at it the other way around, then the success that we achieve is fractured success and will ultimately be unfulfilled success. And I think that that's what I was feeling when I stood on the banks of the Charles River. And I realized that for 15 years I had neglected the community that fed me, the community that gave me purpose, that gave me energy and a sense of myself. And I never want to do that again. And I think and I hope that for all of us, we have identified that community that gives us that energy, that power to succeed. And we are going to feed that community in the same way that that community has fed us. And I believe that that is what our people all truly value, because I think that that's what you value. That's what I value. It's what Omar values. You know, when we look at the basis of it, we can get lost in the details. We can get lost in the tactics. But at base, what we truly value is each other and that sense of connectivity. And therefore, that's where we must put our energy. Because in creating community, we create value. If we know how to move that. And I think that is, at base, the missing link. And what we can do now is explore sort of how to move that.
Well, I mean, what a day, what a moment you had there, because I think we all have those days that we're motivated. We find out what motivates us, what we really want out of life, or are we mass motivated, right? Success, so a lot of people think that success is money. And you found that moment that where you were when you won those medals, which is who you really are, what you are about, what you're meant to do, and it's easier to decide your time once you find it. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. I think that that drives your success in however any other way you want to measure it, however you want to measure beyond that, whether it's money or security or a great job or studying abroad or taking care of your family. It doesn't really matter what it is that you define success as. What matters is what ultimately drives you. Why are you here? And
That's true.
and I think, and that's it, because from that, everything else is possible. And without that, nothing is possible.
Yeah, a lot of times people come up to me and they say, you know, I want to be a millionaire like you or a multimillionaire, and I tell them it's not the money, it's what the money will do for you. Will you be financially free? Will you be with your family more? Will you have time to do your hobbies? Will you have time to do the community things you want to do? So, you know, it's not the money comes if you find what you want to do and focus on things that you love. However, it's got to have the kind of income. If you love something, you know, you could love something that makes no money. However, you love what you do. But if, you know, I always tell everyone, find something you love, but find something to support the lifestyle you want if you love it. Because if you want the lifestyle, then you've got to find something that you love at the same time that's going to get you the kind of income that you want to have that lifestyle. So,
Yeah, it's always been my belief that if you love something enough, you will find a way to make money off of it, and that's exactly what what I did. And and I believe that it's what most of us do ultimately, because as entrepreneurs, what most people are going to do is try to follow their passion, try to follow the things that drive them. And I think oftentimes we get into the necessity of making a living, and the unfortunate outcome of that is that we give up on those things that are really going to take us where we want to go, including making a better living. And I'll give it just a personal example of this. I mean, I was coaching at the Naval Academy and teaching history, and this was in the fall of 1992. And you know, neither one of those professions pays much. They pay somewhere at the time in the neighborhood of $25,000. I mean, that's what I was making for a long, long time. That's basically what I was making. But I was very engaged in what I was doing because I really, really enjoyed coaching a lot, and I enjoyed teaching a lot. But I'm a competitive guy, and I wanted to see if I could be more, quote unquote, successful, which means could I get more money to do some of the other things which I thought I wanted to do. So I sat down for a couple of weeks, and it took me a while, I'm not the brightest bulb, and to determine what it was that I was all about, what it was that I really loved to do. Now you could say, well, obviously you were coaching and you're teaching, you enjoyed coaching and teaching, but what at the heart of coaching and teaching was the motivator, was the driver, what does a coach and a teacher have? And so that took a while to understand what that was all about. And once I came to the personal conclusion of what was driving me, then I said, okay, how can I actually make a living doing what it was that I love to do, which ultimately is to help people to see in themselves what they have. And then I get my affirmation from that. When I see someone who understands, the light bulb goes off, what it is they're all about and what it is they can do and where it is they can go. And then I see them actually go that way and engage that way. I get a tremendous kick out of that, a tremendous affirmation, and that drives me. That gives me energy and gets me up in the morning and gives me purpose. So therefore, I'm like, okay, well, that's who I am. That's who I am. And so do I want to get away from that by doing something that doesn't speak to that part of me? And the answer was no. I don't want to get away from who I am. Why should I want to do that? But obviously, I had no idea, other than coaching and teaching, how I could actually make a better living in terms of my income than that. And it took a while to sort of understand how. And the way I did it was, how can I help more people? How can I help people outside of the rowing community or outside of the classroom in history? How can I help people who might otherwise be not able to do what makes them who they are? And when I looked around, there was a lot of opportunities there in the political arena, in the business community, in the sports arena, and all of these things, wherever there were people that were trying to lead other people to be great themselves. And that's how we kind of developed the business that we did. But it was all about what it was that I was all about at that point. I didn't want to get away from that. And I think that what I missed then, and I understand now, is that yes, that's what I was all about. But in order to do that, I had to do that with other people. And what really got me going was the affirmation within the community that I was associated with. That's what it was all about, and that's always been what it's all about. And as we've gone through the last 20 years of programs at every level, dealing from the C-suite down to mid-management, down to secretaries, down to entrepreneurs and everybody, it's all the same. Everybody shares this, which is the first secret of inspirational leadership. We just, everybody wants to be part of something bigger. It's so powerful. And so if we want to be successful as a leader, then we have to take advantage of that. Everybody wants to feel part of something bigger than themselves, which ultimately means everybody wants to be part of a community. Why? Because from that community comes power. It comes purpose. It's energy. And as leaders, that's what we want. We want as much energy as we can possibly generate in a community of people. And we then want to be able to use that energy in order to achieve something else, an objective, a tactical objective. Create, go up into space, finish a project. It's been a bad week, by the way, for people wanting to go up into space, but that will change. There will be better weeks ahead. For those of you who are, of course, familiar with what's happened in the last week or so with our space flight aspirations. But that will change because that community is a strong community. And it's a powerful community because there are people who value being part of that community. And they will call each other up. And they will help each other. And they will redirect. If nobody cared, then there would be no community. And there would be no energy. And there would be no power. And they don't care who cares outside of the community. They care who cares inside the community, which is why that they will bounce back and they will keep going. And I think that ultimately, as leaders, that's what we want. We want to develop that sense of community. So unfortunately, for a lot of us, we're so objective focused or so money focused or so whatever focused that we lose track of that, which means that we're dissipating our energy. We're using our energy in other ways. Whereas, in fact, the pursuit of community should be the way we're using our energy. And I mean practically in that we want to, in our own work teams or our own family teams or whatever, we want to be actively, consciously developing the ties that bind us to each other. Ties of loyalty, ties of commitment to each other, ties that can be built on a day-to-day basis by the emails we send to each other, the phone calls we make, the events we plan, all of those things that are used to build stronger ties that will turn into accountability and the things that make a high-performance team. And I do find that in the work environment, the more time that I spend developing ties that bind me to my own team as well as me to the clients that we work with, the more time I spend there, the more that comes back to me. And the less time I spend there, the less successful from a tactical sense, meaning that the income goes down or we don't achieve the project that we want to achieve, the more or the less success we have there. And it's directly related to community and the development of community.
Great. Well, and as you know, once you get that energy and the passion and the purpose, then service comes out of that. And service comes out of loving what you do and is the essence of greatness, because when you are serving other people, that's when you feel best.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe that if you've selected your path correctly, that's what you're always doing. That's what you're always doing, is that you wind up serving the community. And, of course, you're serving yourself. Let's
It's all
move to
about
the
the
next.
contribution, you know? It's all
Yeah.
about the contribution, yes.
Yeah, and I'm not saying, you know, well, maybe I am. I don't really know anymore. I mean, in terms of, is it touchy-feely? You could say all this stuff is, yeah, it is, sure, it is. You know, that's what high-performance teams are. I mean, regular teams are easy. You can build a regular team overnight. Just have a group of people together, give them an objective. That's easy. High-performance teams, not so much. Because high-performance teams are teams that answer the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning when you don't want to do that. You'd rather just roll over and pretend that it never rang. But you pick it up because there's somebody on the line that you have a communal attachment to and therefore a sense of accountability with. They're going to hold you accountable. They're going to ask, why didn't you pick up that phone? And you're going to pick it up because you want to. And that, to me, is the essence of a high-performance team. When you are trying to live up to everybody else in the team and they're trying to live up to you. And all of these things happen at once. And I believe that starts with the attainment of, with the intention of the attainment of community. That intent right away. You know, there's a great example here. Again, to go back to my rowing days, there were two ways you could make the U.S. national team back in the 80s, and actually for most of the length of sort of international rowing here. You could make the U.S. national team if you were selected by a coach, the national team coach, at a camp where there was an open invitation all around the country. So sometimes as many as 125 people would be invited, sometimes only 16 to 20 people would be invited, depending on the coach. But that was one way that you could make the team. The other way was you could win an open trial, just like track and field. You could take your boat, your double or your pair or your four or whatever to an open trial, and if you won, then you could go. And in the years that I was rowing, that was always defined for us in terms of community, although we never really would have talked about it in that way. An open invitation to the national camp was a dog-eat-dog affair. When you went to the national camp with whether it was 125 people or 16 or 20 people, you were, for the most part, treated like meat. You came in and you beat your head against the wall every single day, twice a day, 3 times a day. You were exhausted at the end of every practice. You could be cut in a heartbeat with no exit interview, no have a nice day. It was totally mercenary approach with the philosophy that we're going to get the 8 best people in that 8-oared shell or the 4 best people in that 4-oared shell, and those 8 individuals or those 4 individuals are going to represent the country in the World Championships to the best of their abilities, individuals, and therefore the country. That was the mentality that we associated with the camp. True or false, that's what we associated with it. The trial system was a bit different. You tended to go to a club, and you went to a club that had a long and storied tradition, upwards of 150 years of tradition, like my club at Penn AC, or there were many other clubs of this nature. And you would have a club coach who'd been there for a long time, who had developed a culture, a tradition, a style of rowing. You knew exactly what you were getting when you showed up. And the entire approach right from the beginning was very different. You went out, you ate together, you played together, you worked together, you had fun together, and you trained together the whole time. And we knew when we went to the club that there weren't going to be 5 or 10 or 20 new guys coming in. It was who you had. There might be 1 or 2 that went in and out, injuries and so forth and so on. Every once in a while somebody else would come in, but it was all about the development of a complete whole. It was all about the development of a collective ego, a collective competence, a team-based approach. And right from the beginning, the whole culture was about community. It was antithetical to the way that the grind of the national camp operated. And what a difference when we would get together and race the national camp at the regattas that we did. Was there an underdog mentality operating there? Absolutely. No question there was. But the underlying mentality, if in retrospect we can identify it now as such, was the sense of bonds that tied us together that were steel-like, absolutely gripping in their intensity. And there was no cutting, there was no devaluing of you as an individual. There was a total uplifting of the value of the individual within the collective. And that power elevated every single crew that I had the honor of rowing on, and all of those people that I had the privilege of rowing with, elevated them to another level of performance, another level of their potential. It wasn't like the guys in the camp weren't pulling hard. They were working hard, absolutely. But I always got the feeling that when push came to shove and things got a little bit tough, that they fell back on themselves as individuals. They didn't fall back on the collective. And in the club environment, which from the beginning was about the collective, that's all we had to fall back on. And it was always successful. And that just didn't mean winning medals, because we did. There was no question about that. In the long run, successful for us meant the sense of purpose, the sense of being part of something which gave us the power to appreciate our lives. And I think that when we're talking about leadership, that's what you're trying to give to yourself and to all of those people that you have the privilege to lead. You're helping them with their own potential as individuals, but also their appreciation of what it means to live. At least that's what it means to me. Because what does it mean to complete a project ultimately? To complete the tactics of a task ultimately? Is a short-term reward for that. No question. We all feel it. We all know it. And it can translate to money. It can translate to security, to anything. But that is transitory. It's always transitory. But I think what has real power and what is permanent, never leaves our DNA, is the memory of being part of something special, part of something bigger than ourselves. And I think that that gives us the power to move forward. So that is the missing link, and it's an attitude to me. It's an attitude. When we are trying to lead, that is what we're trying to develop. And what we're trying to develop in the people that we are honored to lead is the energy that they have to be the best that they can possibly be and to experience their lives like they've never been experienced before. And that's always been the greatest affirmation and aspiration.
Very good. Good stuff, guys. Hope you guys are taking a lot of notes. And by the way, we are recording this, and we are going to send a link out. We have the service now that we send you guys a link, so all of you in my database and Dan's database can listen to this at your own leisure. So this is exciting stuff. So thousands of you will have this webinar at your beck and call to listen to and empower you to lead your teams.
Thanks, Omar. It's just been it's been a great opportunity to sort of go into this type of philosophy, because it is at base apparently a philosophical discussion, but I've never felt that way. I felt, in fact, being a very practical person when I was coaching or teaching or leading business teams and so forth, that this is the practical essence of leadership. This is what we must think about every single morning when we wake up, because obviously our actions are driven by the way we're thinking. And so if we wake up thinking that our first emphasis is the pursuit of community, then our actions are driven by that. The first thing we do after we have our morning cup of coffee or tea or whatever you drink out there is, who are we going to talk to? What are we going to say? What kind of message are we going to send to whom today? And when we start thinking like that, rather than how can I close this deal or anything else that is directly tactically related, all of that other stuff flows out of the conscious pursuit of communal ties that bind. And I really believe that it's just a foundation. And then when you suggest things that need to be done, people are going to do it. And they're going to do it with energy. They're going to do it with commitment and power, because they believe in the mission. And ultimately, of course, the mission is to get closer to one another. The mission is to develop more energy of one another. The mission is more community. And that has always been the case. You read history, you can just go through the last 10,000 years of recorded history and chart the rise and the fall of empires, from the Egyptian empire right through the Greeks and the Romans and so forth and so on, the Carthaginians, all the way through, and it's always the same. You know, the rise of empire is driven and fueled by the rise of community. And when empires fall, and a lot of times it's for reasons that historians and scientists will identify as varied as barbarians at the gates or plague on the borders or whatever. But no matter what reason is given, or confluence of reasons are given for the destruction of these very, very large groups of people, all of those are at core destroying community. That's what plague does. You begin to be wary of your neighbor. You don't take care of each other. You run away. And so the ties that bind you together are destroyed. And the community is destroyed. And to a certain extent, that's what happened to the Roman Empire. It's a confluence of these type of events. So it's not something that is impractical or touchy-feely. This is leadership. This is the missing link. It is the link that drives all other links, which is why we just go on and on about it, because it's also not easy to do. It does take the mindset right from the beginning to do it, and that means overcoming your own personal foibles, your own personal insults that might keep you from reaching out to people. So that's, however, what makes great leaders great leaders. The ability to constantly do that despite the slings and arrows. But it will require everything you've got. And I think that when you do it, you will find, if you chart your success, you can just go out there and chart your success based on your strength of community and the effort that you're putting into the conscious development of those ties that bind. You will find that your success will be directly commensurate with that, because your energy is going to come from that, your power, your sense of yourself, your sense of purpose. All of that stuff is going to come from that. I'll guarantee, I'll go out on a limb and guarantee you that. And I think Omar would definitely agree, because if there's one thing that he's really good at, it's developing community. And it's that reaching out, constantly trying to develop the ties that bind. Now, you don't have to agree with that, Omar, because that's...
I do agree. In fact, I think that that's something a lot of leaders never get. And that community that you're talking about creates momentum. And that momentum is something that each one of your individual team members start looking forward to the day, because they know they're moving ahead. Like, for instance, we both worked with Yellow Book USA, and I remember meeting Joe Walsh when he had 3 states, New Jersey, New York, and Florida, and he met me at a boot camp, and he said, I want you to help me build my company to 48 states, and every time I buy a Yellow Page, you're going to go there and Yellow Book them. And what he did is he created that community, that, which is what he believed, which was true, that it was the giant, you know, David going against Goliath, and they were there to beat the bad guys, and the bad guys were the big, you know, bells and things like that, like the big state phone companies, and he was going to undercut them by half. And did it work? Yeah, he went from 400 salespeople to 7,500 salespeople I trained, and he sold it 7 years ago, and everybody was on the team and empowered, and momentum and community and fired up and passion and desire and interest and all the things that we've spoken about today. So yes, I agree 100%.
Yeah, business is all about that. It's all branding. What's branding? You know, I used to say that this business that we're involved with is all about relational sales. It's all about relationships. And then I thought, wait a minute, everything's about relationships. Whether you're AT&T or you're a small mom and pop business, it's all about relationships. You're all trying to create community and ties that bind. I mean, that's why Starbucks was so successful in my mind. I mean, a tremendous sense of community, a sense that Starbucks was the place to go. And this is what a good brand does. A good brand like Nike's a great concept, because they've got a very, very small and wonderful and powerful little logo there, and they have a way of doing things, and you wear that shirt around or whatever, and you're part of a community. And every good brand does that. And so it's everything is relational sales. Everything is community. Even commodities. So, you know, it may not be that way, strictly speaking, in the science of economics, but in sales speak, that's pretty much what I think it is. And certainly that defines business success. If you don't have a sense of community, then why would anybody like you or your product?
I agree. Should we cover the next slide for the team?
Yeah, I suppose we've gotten on a roll here, or I've gotten on a roll anyway. So let's move on and see what we have. Yeah.
Because it all ties into everything you were talking about.
Yes. What do we pursue with our objectives? Absolutely. So this is what we have to ask as we move on from the why are we here? Because we, I think, as leaders, for ourselves first, have to explore how we value the expectations of society. And when we get caught up with the expectations of society, what is the reward for that, and what is the cost of that? And I think that if we take the time, and a lot of us here probably haven't taken the time, I didn't for a long time, take the time that was required to examine where I was going and what the cost of that path that I had chosen was going to be. And I think we need to step back every once in a while and tie the why are we here with the expectations that we have been led to believe are our due and what the cost of that is. I think American society, just as a sort of a general comment, is we're a wonderful society for success in terms of economic success. We're driven. There is no question. There's expectations that society has for us that we have bought into 100%. There's a standard of living which we have mutually agreed upon is acceptable for the definition or the status of success. And so we're driving ourselves to that, and we measure ourselves with that. And all that means to me at this point is that we are slave to the expectations that we all agree are worthy of us. And that's fine. That's fine, as long as we don't get away from what is truly driving us, which of course is the sense of community in my mind. We get a reward for all of this. There's a tremendous social reward for achieving the expectations of society. We are valued within a larger community, and we have a sense that that's important. The personal cost we have to measure, and that's going to be different for each one of us. I told you that story about sitting on the bank at the head of the Charles, and going back, which I hadn't really done over the previous 15 years or so, and for the first time clearly seeing the personal cost of going the direction that I had gone, which was in the pursuit of society's expectations and the social reward that I had given to that. And there was a personal cost. All of those people that I had seen up at the head of the Charles were 15 or 20 years older, and I had missed them and that 15 or 20 years. A lot of them, of course, were still in pretty good shape, which was great, but all of the ties that bound us together that were still strong at a certain level could have been so much stronger. And the joy that I had missed over that 15 or 20 years was painful, was very painful, and it still is. It has driven me, of course, to another direction, or in another direction, which I'm not going to let that happen again. And we are going to make sure that those ties that bind us together are reinvigorated and rejuvenated during that time. So that may not be the same with you. I don't know what your expectations are or how you link into what is important to you in society and what you think the social reward of what you're doing is right now. I don't know that. That's up to you to figure that out. But if you're still listening, then I would look back and say, what am I doing? Why am I here? Where am I driving to? And what's the cost of that? And what is really important to me? What is really important?
Those are great questions. I hope everyone's writing those down if you're not driving, because at the end of your life, and I'm not saying it could be the fourth quarter for you, maybe you're, in your 55 or 60s and you're saying to yourself, okay, what's it all about? I mean, one of the things I find that a lot of people do, Dan, and maybe you, from this personal cost that we're talking about, is they compare themselves to others, and that's one of the biggest things you should never do. You just do the best you can do and be the best you can be, and that will make you compete with yourself, which is what I believe in.
Yeah, but we all do it, don't we? I mean, obviously, we're comparing ourselves. Otherwise, we'd all be monks in a cave. I mean, which might be fine. I don't know, but we all do it, and
it's true. I mean, I've done it. I see a lot of, like tomorrow I'm speaking with Harvey Mackay and Brian Tracy and Anton Walker, and And you know his story. He went through $100 million in 5 years, his whole contract. Blew every dime of it. And he owes money. So think about his personal cost of not understanding the things you're talking about, the community, society's expectations, the social reward, forgetting who you are and where you come from. I mean, that's a large cost.
Yeah, and I think, I'm not saying, by the way, that any of this is necessarily wrong. It's not. It's up to you. It's your personal feeling. You know, it's all we do know is that at the end of your life, you can't take it with you. Obviously, no matter what you have, there's no question about that. You can distribute it to a certain extent to those people who are in your community, and that might be worth everything. But all I'm saying is that as a leader, what we're trying to do is be aware of the basis for why people really do what they do, why they create the energy that they create for themselves and in a collective effort. And leadership is all about creating energy in a collective effort. So I think there is a lot of personal examination that can be very useful in a leadership experience. It's not useless in any way to ask these questions. In fact, it's extremely tactically and strategically useful as a leader to ask these questions, to be aware of these questions, and to set the environment to where you're actually helping people answer these questions for themselves. And you know, if they go away from you because they've answered the question differently than you want, that's okay. Because what you've done is given them the opportunity to help at somewhere else, some other level, with someone else, and it's all going to come back and lift you up. It's not going to bite you in the butt to help somebody else find what it is that they're all about. I've certainly never, ever found that.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Should we move on to the next slide?
Yeah, I suppose let's finish it up.
All right, turning it around, the pursuit of community.
Yeah, I think we've said everything we needed to say at this point in terms of how to do that. You turn it around, you go away from society's expectations, and you go to the expectations that motivate every single man, woman, or child out there. And you put your energy into that pursuit, creating ties that bind in between people, which creates accountability with each other. When you create accountability with each other, you can pretty much throw anything into that mix, tactically, anything that you want to do, and people will be accountable with each other in pursuing that objective. So that's it. So every single thing that you think about is, as a leader, is how am I going to create those ties that bind us together? And that'll turn it around.
That's right. Well, I wanted to have everyone realize that we are going to be doing an event in February or March in Miami, and also Dan has created a coaching program, and we are going to send out the event, the new date for the event that we're doing, which will be in February or March according to Dan's schedule. And also the mentoring, we'll be reaching out to you, but we would like you, if you're interested, to email us, and I'll have Jennifer send it out with the link that everybody's going to get. And is there any parting words you'd like to say, Dan?
Just thanks to everybody for listening. I know it was a little off sort of our more formal approach here, but obviously we all have personal experiences which drive some thoughtful analysis, and I think that's what happened with me personally, and I hope that it happens with you as well. And you know, so I just thank you for being here and being part of it.
Thank you, Dan, and we will be doing another webinar either this end of the month, it looks like, and it's going to be something you can take this webinar and build on it, And again, we wish you greatness. We wish you great success. Have a great week. And thank you, Dan, for a wonderful, wonderful, enlightening, eye-opening webinar. Again, thank you.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you, everyone.